Shalom, shalom. This is Maria Mir Writer, and today we're going to discuss Matthew 5:17 through 20. Now, I'm going to do something a little different today, and I'm actually going to create a series of lessons, quick lessons, that's going over like the basic tenets of the Hebrew understanding. So they're going to be called Hebrew Hermeneutics. This is the target audience for this is really people who are new to the walk. And if you've been in the walk for a while, this probably isn't the video for you. You probably already understand this. That don't mean you won't get anything from it, but you probably already got a good understanding of this already. However, I realized that a lot of the things that we discuss on this platform is really geared towards people who are already in the walk and are trying to understand the culture more. They're excited about finding out the nuances of the text in this cultural context is setting. They want to reject dogma and be open to whether it's a agricultural understanding or a archaeological understanding of the text, or something that has revealed something, whether it was some document or some text that's been found or something like that. But today, like I say, this is going to be a little different. But here we go. I don't want to waste too much time. I want this to be quick so that they can go ahead and get what they need from this lesson and move on to the next one. Matthew 5:17. Hamashiach, who is Christ, fulfilled the law. Do not think that I came to destroy the law or the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For surely I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, one jot or one tittle will by no means pass from the law till all is fulfilled. Whoever therefore breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches men so shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does and teaches them, he shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I say to you that unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the Scribes and Pharisees, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. So like I said, I could do an hour lesson or more on this particular verses, these verses right here. But for the sake of time and to make this a little easier to swallow for those who are new, I'm going to keep this really condensed, and I'm going to be hitting on things pretty fast. All right. So, of course, the yellow things mean something, but we're going to start where it says, do not think I came to destroy the law or the prophets. What's typically always propagated is that the law is done away with. But however, when you look at the text itself, it mentions the prophets as well. Now, we can all agree, Christian, Hebrew alike, we can all agree that the prophecies have not all been fulfilled, right? We can all pretty much agree that that is the case. So why is it that the law is being isolated and being labeled as being done away with? Is that because of our own desires that we don't want to have to do these things? Is this because of our we've been conditioned to believe so through our time through Christianity, through the Catholic Church and what they've done, to those who used to keep the law? Like, that's something that you should really research, is how those in the Vatican and those who was ruling at that time perceived the law. Because remember, Christianity, that's the daughter. Protestantism is the daughter of Catholicism. So they're related, right? That's when you're a daughter, you're related. Catholicism is the mother church, and all this other stuff is the daughter. But so the law is isolated as being done away with, but we're gonna continue to see if that is really the case. So then we get to fulfill. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill. So if you destroy something, you are definitely getting rid of it. Like, no one breaks a glass and keeps it. Right. If you break a glass, you're going to throw it away. It's destroyed. It has no more value, has no more use. Get rid of it. There's no point in keeping it around. But he said he did not come to destroy. So if he was going to destroy the law, trample it underfoot, disregard it, make it void as things, these are things that people have said, then there would by no means be a reason to keep the law. But he said he did not come to do that. He did not come to destroy it, but to fulfill it. So now we got to figure out what fulfill means. So I got a quick example. Two individuals driving on a highway. They're going to the same location. So they're on the same highway, same time, but one of them is going 85 miles an hour. One of them is going 70 miles an hour. The speed limit is 70 miles an hour. The person who was going 85 miles an hour, they eventually got to the location first, but did they break the law? Technically, they break the law. Even if they were not given a ticket, they technically still broke it, because what the ordinance is 70 miles an hour. That is the ordinance that had been placed by that governing body, that governing authority. They have created a law for whatever reason. In this case, it could be to protect individuals. If you go too fast on certain roads, if you got turns and stuff like that, you can end up crashing. It could be for the protection. It's just like Torah is really for our protection. If we change the way we look at what is known as the law and stop seeing it as a burden and a hindrance of our own free will, and see it as this is protecting us, this is protection. And when you go outside of that protection, that is how you get opened up for all types of different attacks. So if we change our perspective on the law, then we will begin to have those scales come from the eyes and be able to truly see the purpose for it and begin to see how great it actually is. But the person 85 miles an hour to get to the destination, the person going 70 miles an hour gets there a little slower, but he still gets there. He doesn't go past 70 miles an hour. That's his speed. He was steady till he got there. He has fulfilled that law, that governing body, that authority, the ruling principles, principality, municipality, whatever you want to call it. They set that law. This person carried that law out. They observed that law. They followed that law. They obeyed that law to the very end. They fulfilled it. So now driver number 3 comes along. So driver number 1 going 85 miles an hour. Driver number 2 fulfills the law going 70 miles an hour. Driver number 3, what is his expected responsibility? Is it expected of this driver? Is it expected of him to have a free pass to go how fast he wants to go? So this driver can go 90 miles an hour if he wants to, because the law has been fulfilled? Or is this driver expected to go no faster than 70 miles an hour despite someone already fulfilling that law? They will still be expected to go 70 miles an hour because that is the law. That is the law that has been given, and until that law has been changed, that it's still the law that has to be abided by, right? So that person is expected to go 70 miles an hour no matter who went 70 miles an hour before them. That's what we have to look at when we're thinking about the law in the scriptures. That's what we got to think about. Yes, the Messiah did fulfill the law, but he never got rid of it. And when you go deeper, you understand what he really did and what he really, quote unquote, replaced or removed. But that's not for this lesson right now. We're just focused on the entire law that is not done away with. Okay, so for surely, verse 18, for surely I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, one jot or one tittle will by no means pass from the law till all is fulfilled. All right, what would we consider? Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped fulfill. So the definition of fulfill, that is Strong's G4137, plurau. All right, plurau. It means, it has quite a few different definitions. What Hebrew has is something called stems, verb stems, and stuff like that. So it kind of helps identify. If you can identify the stem, then you can identify which definition really is being used here. Greek isn't the same way, and I'm not a Hebrew expert per se, but I understand Hebrew. I know Hebrew for the most part. Greek, that's not my area of expertise. However, I can read and I understand context. So right here, you got quite a few definitions. You got to make full, fill up, to cause to abound, all these different definitions. But then you get to this bottom one and you find something very peculiar right here. It says to fulfill. It literally says in the definition to fulfill, i.e. to cause God's will, his will as made known in the law, to be obeyed as it should be. Like that driver going 70 miles an hour, he obeyed that law as it should be. So to be obeyed as it should be in God's promises given through the prophets. Oh, there you go. You got your law and your prophets right there to receive fulfillment. Let me read that one more time. To fulfill, i.e., to cause God's will as made known in the law to be obeyed as it should be in God's promises given through the prophets to receive fulfillment. Think about that. Now, when you go back to there and you think about that particular definition, that one right there, this in context makes perfect sense, because he's saying he didn't come to destroy, but he came to cause God's will as made known to the law to be obeyed as it should be. This is why he would correct people on how to walk out the law. This is why when they came to him with questions, he'll let them know, like, you don't understand. And he would correct their misunderstandings. And they kept trying to trap him, but he was well studied, he was well versed, and of course he had the spirit of the Most High Yah upon him. So he did not come to destroy, but to cause God's will as made known in the law to be obeyed as it should be in God's promises given through the prophets to receive fulfillment. That makes perfect sense when you insert that into this word right here. If you just remove that and place that definition there, it makes so much sense. Now, for surely I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, one jot or one tittle will by no means pass away till all is fulfilled. I kind of paraphrase that, but I'm trying to hurry up and get this lesson done. So we got to try to figure out, what does they mean by heaven and earth? So I did a lesson on covenants, and it was on ancient Near Eastern covenants, and it was covenants to identify, how important were these covenants? Were these things easily break? What happened when the covenant is broken? Or who made covenants, and what are witnesses to the covenant? There was other people making covenants. Like, we went over the entire scope, and we even reviewed some ancient Near Eastern covenants, some real ones that were made, that were found in the in archaeology. So right here, when we go to examine heaven and earth, it's a specific reason why that is there. And if you don't fully understand that, then you won't fully understand this verse or these verses and what he means by this particular phrase. So one thing that you find out in covenants is that there were always witnesses, and there were divine witnesses as well. So you have human witnesses, but you had divine witnesses as well. So I'm not going to go over all of these, but here are some of them right here. So this is from I believe it was a Hittite covenant, and this is, if I'm not mistaken, I just copied and pasted this. So I didn't add anything here. None of this is from me. This is literally what was listed in there. So you got divine witnesses, you got the storm god of heaven. Who else you have here? You have the Lord of the oath. You got Ishtar of the battlefield. You got Ishtar of Nineveh. You got the gods and goddesses of Hadiland. Who else you got? You got the mountains, you got the rivers, you got the springs, the great sea. Oh, what is this right here? Heaven and earth. See, what the Messiah was doing is he was using covenant language. This is what people at that time would understand. And what does it say? Let these be witnesses to this treaty and to the oath. Let these be witnesses to this treaty and to the oath. See, when you look in the scriptures, you will see people making covenants all the time. It ain't always as grand as it was when Abraham did it. Right? When he go into a vision and you got this whole little scenario going on, this whole little scene. It ain't always as grand as that. You have them where it's a little more subtle, and you have some that's maybe not so subtle, but you see that there were divine witnesses. And I wish I would have put some of these in here, but you'll get the point. If you look at Jacob, when he was fleeing from his father-in-law Laban or Laban, they end up making a covenant. And one of the witnesses was a pillar. A pillar was used to be a witness. They did stuff like this all the time. So when the Most High created the covenant with Israel, what he did was the elders were witnesses, But not only the elders, it was heaven and earth were witnesses. Heaven and earth was witnesses. See, the elders was there. One of the roles of the elders was to be that point of transmission of whether you want to call it education or culture or character or whatever, however you want to view it. But they was there to continue the transmission of information on down to successive generations. So everyone after them, these elders would pass these on, and then so the elders would pass it on to the youth. The youth would one day become elders, and they would pass it on to the youth. Those youth would one day become elders, and they would pass it on. The elders were responsible for this transmission of information. So the Most High would call elders over there. Hey, bring the elders here so that they can be witnesses to this. So the covenant was established through the elders. Like, they saw it, they were able to speak on it in future times. But then you also have something like heaven and earth being called. So let's go ahead and take a quick look here. So I'm sorry, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So one thing about covenants is they also came with guarantees. So they had divine witnesses and they had guarantees. Let me read this real quick. And this is from Dr. Roy Beecham and Ancient Near Eastern Covenants. Often the language of the covenant included explicit, heightened verbiage that served to instate guarantees with covenant fidelity and the ongoing fulfillment of covenant terms. Witnesses, either actual or theoretical, animate or inanimate, could be enlisted in order to assure that the oath once sworn could not be later questioned. That is so heavy. That is so important. If you don't understand covenants, you really don't understand this book. But if you don't understand covenants, at a very minimum, you won't understand Matthew 5:17 through 20. You won't understand what he's saying at that point when he's referencing heaven and earth. He's literally referencing the covenant right there. The names of the deities may be invoked, and we saw that with the Hittite covenant. The names of the deities may be invoked, and appalling consequences could be embraced should one party or the other disregard the covenant. We see that in Deuteronomy 28. You have the blessings if you obey the covenant, and you have the curses if you disobey. You see that in Leviticus, I believe it's 26. I'm sorry if I'm wrong, but I believe it's Leviticus 26. You also see, and this is what's not often referenced, is Leviticus 26 also have blessings and curses that's referenced according to obedience and disobedience to the covenant. But let's see, absurdities were sometimes enumerated, like the falling of the sky or the drying up of the sea. And we'll see that in I believe it's the Psalms, when he's talking about casting off his people. Only if XYZ happens, then he will cast off his people. So we see that. I don't want to misquote it, but that's there in Psalms. I believe I put it in here. If not, I'll just I'll reference it on the screen. As prerequisite to covenant failure, these guarantees all serve to give greater weight to the most important and only necessary feature of the covenant, the oath. An oath is a solemn act. An oath is more solemn when sworn before witnesses and deities, all while invoking horrors and absurdities to preclude and or follow the breaking of the oath. This is why you see what you see with the Most High. And this is why those Israelites were cursed, as other nations around them could be doing wickedness and doing all of these things. But he made a covenant with Israel. So when Israel broke the covenant, he used those other nations to be the ones to punish them. I'm telling you, you have to understand covenants. But here we go. Deuteronomy 30:19, I call heaven and earth as witnesses today against you that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that both you and your descendants may live. This is right after Deuteronomy 20, of course, because it's Deuteronomy 30, but this is right after the blessing and the curses were given, and he was going through, hey, you do this, you get this, you had not to tell, and all that stuff. And then you go to the curses. And then, bam, here you go. I call heaven and earth as witnesses. Heaven and earth, they are witnesses to the covenant. They are witnesses to the covenant. What's another one? Deuteronomy 31:28. Gather to me all the elders of your tribes. There go those elders, those keepers and transmitters of the information of the culture, and your officers, that I may speak these words in their hearing and call heaven and earth to witness against them. All right. For behold, so here's another reference to heaven and earth. For behold, this is Isaiah 65:17. I create a new heavens and a new earth, and the former shall not be remembered or come to mind. Let me say this before I continue. One reason why you would want to have something as a inanimate object as a witness to the covenant. And yes, this may not make sense to our Western thought, but it clearly makes sense to theirs because it's in our holy scriptures. And it's also in the understanding that other cultures had at that time. So while it may not make much sense to us, calling inanimate objects as witnesses has deeper levels. And one reason why you would want to call something like, let's say, heaven and earth as a witness is because, let's back up for a quick second. You have the elders and the officers, right, of the tribes, but eventually they die. And what if they haven't done their job and they haven't transmitted everything and they haven't transferred the information and all this stuff? Then who are the witness? Who can witness against the people who break the covenant? So if the elders don't transmit and they die off, or let's just say that maybe maybe something just happened to where the elders died. Maybe it wasn't that they didn't do their job and transmit the information, but let's say something else happened, some type of event happened and it caused the elders to die off. So now this next generation, let's say they were fairly young, and before that happened, they rise up and they don't know anything about this. There's no witnesses. They can't be held accountable for breaking the covenant. But when you use something like heaven and earth, there is nowhere you can go to escape those witnesses. There's nowhere that you can go to escape heaven and earth. Nowhere. So even if the elders die or they don't handle their responsibilities or they just become wicked and people get scattered and all this stuff, this is how you can still be punished even though you're scattered, because there are still witnesses testifying against you. You have the land and the skies. There's nowhere you can go where you're not associated with the land or the skies. That's why it's really an ingenious thing for the Most High to use heaven and earth as witnesses, knowing that the proclivity of our people, knowing what would potentially happen. And if you want to hold those people accountable as they should be, because they made this covenant and they have to keep their end of the bargain, then you need witnesses that's going to always be present to testify against them. If you have someone commit a crime and you have no witnesses, then that person gets to go away scot-free and probably will commit the same crime over and over and over because there's no one to testify against them, right? But with those witnesses there, no matter where the Israelites are scattered, they can continue to be under the curses because there are always witnesses testifying against them. So let's continue. Okay. So, until all is fulfilled, you got all. So let me try to condense this real quick. You got all is fulfilled. You got the laws fulfilled. You got the prophecies fulfilled. Then he will create a new heavens and a new earth, and the former should not be remembered, or the former should not come to mind. Because what is the reason for? You're basically now by creating a new heaven and a new earth. These are new. For sake of argument, these are new inanimate objects, right? I was going to say people, but I don't even want to do that. These are new objects. The new heavens and the new earth are not witnesses to the covenant. So now you can do away with that other covenant, because now there are no more witnesses. Now they're not bound by that, because now you can have new laws. You can have you could create a new covenant, because we do know that once the kingdom is restored and all of this, we'll still be keeping certain laws. But once in Revelation comes and New Jerusalem comes down and a new heaven and a new earth comes, everything that happened before is no longer matters. You now have a new heaven, new earth. You have new objects. You have new potential witnesses to maybe a potential covenant in the future. But either way, the old one, once they're out the picture, then those people can no longer be held accountable for that agreement. All right. So here you go. Here's another one in Isaiah. So that's Isaiah 65:17. It's another one in Isaiah. For as the new heavens and new earth that I make. So once again, this shows you that the prophecies, and like I say, I know we can all agree that the prophecies were never, quote unquote, done away with. Right? They were never fulfilled. We can't even mistake that because there's some clear things in there. So we know that there haven't been a new heavens and a new earth. If you believe that, then you own some of that. Let me continue. Jeremiah 31:35-37. Thus says Yahuwah, who gives the sun for light by day, and who fixed order of the moon and the stars for light by night, who stirs up the sea so that its waves roar. Yahuwah of hosts is his name. Okay, here we go. Remember, I was talking about the heightened language here. I said it couldn't list. Where is it at? Absurdities were sometimes enumerated, like falling of the sky or drying up of the sea, as prerequisite to covenant failure. All right, so these absurdities would be listed. Heightened verbiage served to instate guarantees of covenant fidelity. So when the Most High uses language like we're getting ready to read, he is assuring his covenant children, Israel, the seed of Jacob, that it ain't no doing away with this covenant. He is bound by this covenant, so he can't do away with it. So he says, Yahuwah of hosts is his name. If this fixed order departs from before me, declares Yahuwah, then shall the offspring of Israel cease. So what fixed order? The moon and the stars for light by night. If that order departs from him, then the offspring of Israel shall cease. So when they say to you that Israel is no more, there is no more Israel, the church has replaced Israel, that replacement theology, the theology that I despise. This is another reason why I just absolutely despise doctrine. Not only is doctrine divisive and people are so dogmatic, but it's just when people who the book was not written to got their hands on it, then they just created this whole spectrum of beliefs and spread it to the world. Just spread it to the world. But so here you go. So if the order of the moon and the stars departs, then the offspring of Israel will cease from being a nation before me forever. Thus says Yahuwah, if the heavens above can be measured, and the fountains of the earth below can be explored, which we know it can't, it hasn't been done yet, and it won't happen, then I will cast off all the offspring of Israel. So think about that. Listen, if you can measure the heavens, you can't measure the heavens. You know that. We can't do that. It is impossible. If the foundations of the earth below can be explored, the Most High know that cannot be explored. So he just gave you two impossibilities just to assure you, Israelites, that then I will cast off the offspring of Israel. So what that's saying in reverse is, because this cannot happen and this cannot happen, neither will this happen. He will not cast off the offspring of Israel. He will punish us like a responsible father would do to those children who are being disobedient. But then he will cast off the offspring of Israel for all that they have done, declares Yahuwah. Okay. Revelation 21:1-3. Now I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth has passed away. Now you can do this. Now you can go away with what was known as the law or the Torah as we knew it. That's at the end of the book. That's after everything is fulfilled. That's completely after everything. This is after what's known as the millennium reign, the 1,000-year reign, and all that stuff. The adversary is released, and all this whole battle and all this stuff happens. Then, only then, will heaven and earth be done away with. So until heaven and earth pass away, we now see the point where it passes away in Revelation 21, 1 through 3. All right. Now I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and first earth had passed away. At that point, you can now get rid of what we know of as the law. All right. Deuteronomy 17:6, whoever is deserving of death, and the Israelites were deserving of death that by breaking this law, because you have life and that's obedience, and you have death, that's disobedience. He tells you to choose life so that you and your descendants may live. Check this, Deuteronomy 17:6. Whoever is deserving of death should be put to death under the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. He should not be put to death on the testimony of 1 witness. So you have your 2 witnesses, you have heaven and earth. Deuteronomy 19:15. 1 witness shall not rise against a man concerning any iniquity or sin that he commits. By the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, the matter shall be established. Numbers 35:30. Whoever kills a person, the murderer shall be put to death on the testimony of plural witnesses. But 1 witness is not sufficient testimony against a person for the death penalty. Are we understanding that? So when we get here, and I'm just trying to really speed through this last part because this is going on way longer than I anticipated. So that's heaven and earth, right? So you got your fulfilled, your law and the prophets, heaven and earth. And you got the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees. Now, one of the things about the scribes and Pharisees is it's interesting how when people keep the law, they say, oh, you a Pharisee, you Pharisaic, and all this other stuff. Well, the interesting thing is that the Pharisees actually, for the most part, weren't keeping the law. What they were doing is they were teaching the law, but they were abiding by their own traditions, which even is pronounced in the scriptures by the Messiah to be making the word of Yah of none effect. So this is a very interesting conundrum that people, or dichotomy that people end up creating by saying, oh, because you keep the law, you're a Pharisee. Well, that's actually goes in against everything that the Messiah was saying. It's that, let's take a quick look. We don't need me to keep talking about it. So what is righteousness? Righteousness was keeping the law. It says Deuteronomy 6:25. Then it will be righteousness for us if we are careful to observe all these commandments before the Lord our God, as he has commanded us. 1 John 3:7, little children, let no one deceive you. He who practices righteousness, if you're practicing something, you're doing it. If I'm practicing a jump shot, I'm not practicing my jump shot unless I'm actually shooting the basketball. So he who practices righteousness, who is doing righteousness, who's going over and over and over, trying to get something right, trying to perfect something, it is he who is righteous, just as he, capital He, is righteous. So righteousness for them was the observing of the laws, statutes, and commandments. Psalm 119, 172, my tongue shall speak of your word, for all your commandments are righteous. All your commandments are righteous. Okay, I'm not going to go over this, but if you want to go ahead and you look up Strong's G1347, the word for righteousness, go ahead and look that up, and then it'll give you some more understanding on this. But for the sake of time, I'm just going to go ahead and move forward. The righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees. All right, Matthew 23, 1 through 3. Then Yahusha, I'm sorry, I just can't bear myself to say that, spoke to the multitude of his disciples, saying, the scribes and Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. They are the teachers. Therefore, whatever they tell you to observe, that observe and do. Whatever they tell you to observe, that observe and do. That's because, the term practice what you preach is kind of rooted from this, because the Pharisees were not, i.e., practicing what they were preaching. They were teaching, but was not doing. So they say the scribes and Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. Therefore, whatever they tell you to observe, that observe and do. But do not according to their works, for they say and do not do. They're teaching the law, but they're not doing the law. Matthew 23:23. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. What is a hypocrite? If you know anything about a hypocrite, it's a person who says one thing but does something different. Says one thing, does something different. So it's saying to you that your righteousness have to exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees. It's literally telling you that you have to teach and do, or if it's taught to you, you have to do. For I say to you that unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, they were considered unrighteous because they were not doing the law. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you pay tithe and mint and ninths and cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faith. These things you ought to have done without leaving the others undone. So he wouldn't just say do these things because, that's great. These things are highly important. They're even considered weightier matters. But in reference of tithing, at this time, or at that time when this was said, they were still tithing. So something that's more weightier than tithing is justice, mercy, and faith. However, tithing was still commanded. So he says that these justice, mercy, and faith you ought to have done without leaving the others undone. So once again, they're breaking the law because they're only doing partial observance of it. They're only doing the things that's outwardly showing. You pay the tithe, it looks good in public, but justice, mercy, and faith, things that the Most High definitely desires for us to have and proclaim, they were not doing. So once again, you got hypocrites. If they say, they don't do. And then Matthew, the same chapter, and just a little bit further, 27-28. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. Called them hypocrites again. For you are like whitewashed tombs, which indeed appear beautiful outwardly, but inside are full of dead man's bones and all uncleanness. Even so, you also outwardly appear righteous. What is righteousness? Righteousness was the observance of the law. That's how they were made righteous. So you outwardly appear righteous to men, but inside you are full of hypocrisy. What is hypocrisy? And lawlessness. If you know clearly, lawlessness. If you have a law, and if someone is lawlessness, that means they don't observe the law. So if we were having something going on in our city and it was just full of lawlessness, Detroit. I'm from Detroit. This is a place that's full of lawlessness. You got murders, thefts, all different types of things that's happening all the time. It's a city that's full of lawlessness. They're breaking the established laws of Detroit, right? Of that municipality. So likewise with the Most High, if you are not keeping his laws, statutes, and commandments, you are lawless. You practice lawlessness. All right, so I'm not going to go into that. I just kind of went over that quickly. But what were the Pharisees doing? They were teaching righteousness and not practicing it. Last slide. Recap. Matthew 5:17-20. Do not think that I came to destroy the law or the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For surely I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away. So we touched on the law and the prophets. We touched on fulfill. We touched on heaven and earth passing away. All is fulfilled. What happens when all is fulfilled? What happens when all the law and the prophets are fulfilled? You get a new heaven and earth. That's when it passes away. All right. Righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees. Your righteousness has to exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees. So if you're a teacher, you need to teach and do. If you're not a teacher, you need to hear and do. You need to be doers of the word, not just hearers of the word. You need to hear and do. Hear and do. Okay. That do part is important. You have to hear and do. So Once again, I can make this like an hour lesson. I actually went way longer, so it's like 40 minutes now or something along those lines. I could have probably made this an hour and a half lesson just with more and more scriptures, but this is the gist of what this is about. It's just as longer than I anticipated, but nevertheless, you get kind of caught up, and here you are. But this is Matthew 5:17. This is the first episode in the series Hebrew Hermeneutics. Until next time, peace and shalom.